गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। वणकम, प्रणाम एंड जय हिंद। आज हम देखेंगे इमर्जिंग कॉन्टोर्स ऑफ ग्लोबल एंड इंडो पैसिफिक ऑर्डर, और इसके बारे में बात करने के लिए हमारे साथ हैं ब्रिगेडियर अरुण सहगल, जो बहुत दिन के बाद गना शॉट में आ रहे हैं। सर, गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। I have personally missed having a discussion with you on Ghana Shot.
Sir, thank you very much. My fault. I've been a little busy, then slightly unwell sometimes. It's the age, sir. But I assure you, I will not make the same mistake again.
No, sir. It is always a pleasure to talk to you because you bring new thoughts into the dialogue, which is very important for us. You bring something which is absolutely, over the horizon. And unless we start looking at things over the horizon, we are not going to be anywhere. So with this, sir, we'll talk about the how the global, order is changing. The Indo-Pacific order is changing. I'm sure you have a lot to say, but if you allow me, I'd like to set the context for it with
Yes,
a
sir.
small, overview as to what's happening in the world, right? And I'm going to talk of this in very briefly today, but I will be touching upon it later in detail in another presentation. But here we go. Uh, and the first thing is there are a lot of global conflicts going on. We know Ukraine, Israel, Hamas, and West Asia is in pain. Afghanistan, Pakistan is coming into some kind of a criticality with the refugees being sent back by Pakistan. Myanmar has also gone into super criticality because the civil war there वो लंबा हो गया। और साउथ चाइना सी में धीरे 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 उबल के पिछले 2-3 साल में वहां तेज पकड़ लिया आज के दिन। और अगर आप देखेंगे तो ये अफ्रीका के अक्रॉस द स्वॉथ ऑफ नॉर्थ अफ्रीका, सहेल रीजन, मैंने एक डॉटेड ओवल लगाया है। इसको बोलते हैं कू बेल्ट, या हर रोज हर तीसरा दिन एक कू होता रहता है और वहां लड़ाई चलते रहते हैं। तो अगर आप देखेंगे तो इतना अगर हलचल हो रहा है, और इतना हलचल कभी भी पिछले 10 साल 15 साल में हुआ ही नहीं, तो ग्लोबल ऑर्डर में तो बदली होगा ही, राइट। और अच्छी बात यह है कि पहली बार इंडिया में खास कुछ नहीं हो रहा है, राइट। दूसरी बात यह है कि ये ग्राफ देखिए, इस ग्राफ से बड़ा क्लियर एक अच्छा ग्राफ है जिसमें दर्शाया गया है कि पिछले फ्रॉम 89 टू 2022 वॉर्स में, कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स में, स्टेट टू स्टेट कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स में कितने कैजुअलिटीज हुए हैं। अगर आप देखेंगे तो 21-22, राइट, में बिल्कुल एक स्पाइक हो गया है, और इतने कैजुअलिटीज पहले कभी हुए नहीं पिछले 20 साल में। और वही नॉन स्टेट activities में, non-state conflicts which involve non-state actors also, the number of casualties have increased. अगर स्टेट कॉन्फ्लिक्ट और नॉन स्टेट कॉन्फ्लिक्ट में भी मिलके पिछले 1-2 साल में कैजुअलिटीज बढ़ गए हैं, और इस साल तो बढ़ेगा ही, राइट, क्योंकि ये इजराइल हमास वॉर में काफी लोग उनको कैजुअलिटीज हो रहे हैं और सिविलियन कैजुअलिटीज भी काफी हो रहे हैं। तो द ग्लोबल ऑर्डर हैज टू चेंज, क्योंकि ये इवेंट्स ही ऐसे हुए हैं। अगर आप देखेंगे यूक्रेन वॉर में, ये तो इट्स कम ऑलमोस्ट टू स्टेलमेट, और ये फ्रंट लाइन ऐसी स्थगित है, पर यहाँ का अनिश्चितता और ये कॉन्फ्लिक्ट बढ़ता रहेगा, राइट। वेस्ट एशिया में तो प्रॉब्लम हो ही रहा है, हर रोज कुछ ना कुछ हो रहा है। आज के दिन वो प्रिजनर्स एक्सचेंज हो रहा है, सीज फायर है। देखने वाली बात है कि ये सीज फायर टिकेगा या और लड़ाई छिड़ेगा। ओके, इंटरेस्टिंग बात है जो हो रहा है वो साउथ चाइना सी में और उस इलाके में चाइना के साथ। अगर आप ये ग्राफ देखेंगे, ग्राफिक, ये दर्शाता है कि साउथ चाइना सी में चाइना का कितने गतिविधियां बढ़ रहे हैं। बाएं देखे 2021 में ये कोस्ट गार्ड और ये इनका मिलिशिया का मूवमेंट, 2022 में कितना है और 2023 में कितना बढ़ गया है। तो चाइना जो है साउथ चाइना सी में हावी हो रहा है। दूसरी बात, उसी तरीके से पिछले 1 साल से, 1 डेढ़ साल से चाइना एयरक्राफ्ट एयर एक्टिविटी अराउंड ताइवान हैज बीन इंक्रीजिंग। यही है, ये चार पिक्चर्स में, ग्राफिक में दिखाया गया, बाएं से दाहिना, राइट। ये अगस्त 22, नवंबर 22 से लेकर अभी तक आप देखिए कितना बढ़ गया है। ग्राफिकली एक नजर से ही पता चल रहा है बढ़ रहा है। ओके। और ये इनका जो चाइना का नेवल एक्टिविटी बिटवीन द फर्स्ट चेन ऑफ आइलैंड्स एंड द सेकंड आइलैंड चेन भी बढ़ रहा है। यही ट्रैक्स दिखाया गया है जहां इन्होंने काफी एक्सटेंसिव, they carried out extensive fleet exercises and naval exercises, and they've also, uh, simulated an attack on Guam in this. और इसके अलावा the Chinese fighters and aircraft have been, doing very close maneuvers with US aircraft, Canadian aircraft, and of course Taiwanese के साथ तो छेड़छाड़ कर ही रहे हैं। So the area in the South China Sea is becoming hotter. और अगर आप ये सब तीनों युद्ध देखेंगे, तो these are contributing to the changing contours of the global order. So this is what I thought is very important for people to understand before you, put across your views on the emerging global order. So please, over to you, and yeah, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, General Shankar. As usual, it's a phenomenal overview that you've given, and that sets the stage for what little points that I have to share with your audience. My, I will cover my points in four parts. The first part will be what are the emerging contours of the global order. The second will be what is the balance of global power that we are trying to look at. And from there, we will transit to the balance of power in Asia. And then we will see the China US relations. And in all these segments, the role of India will be played up and described in the manner that India is emerging on its own as an important player. So, starting off first, what are the contours of the global order? We have to understand one point. World order is not in decline. There's a perception going around in the world that the world order is in decline, but it is transiting. The global order is transiting from US centric unipolarity to a multipolar polar order. Central point in this is this, that the hegemony of the West is being contested, and there is an attempt being made by China and Russia as an alliance partner to create a bipolar order. We'll talk about it a little more. The important point to understand is this, is that this is the first time in history that the West, its total dominance is being challenged. Now that's an important point. When the general describes the wars all over the world, you will say there's one central player in those wars, and that is the United States and the US alliance system. It is a central point. It is there in every war of them, all those contests, including in the coup in Asia, coup in Africa, where may not be United States directly, but AFCOM is there. But there are United States partners like France and other players who are central to that situation. There are signs of alternative spheres of influence are emerging. Now, this is an important point to understand. The alternative spheres are when you look at Asia, you look at West Asia, you look at even in Europe. The whole issue is the emergence of various spheres of influence who are trying to exercise power and influence. Before the Hamas Palestinian conflict, we were trying to look at a new order emerging in the Arabian Peninsula, which was basically based on economic connectivity. That India, Middle
IMEC.
East, IMEC corridor. So this is the issue that was there, and the whole everybody was looking for a certain degree of stability, peaceful development, and realigning themselves to a better global order, a global system where the countries have economic states rather than marred by uh, political and military conflicts. The next point we have to note is that China is not a threat to America. Now, this is something which we need to understand. From China does not pose a direct threat to America. What China is trying to do is it is questioning the dominance of United States geopolitically. The Chinese growth, Chinese technology, Chinese trade, Chinese economic development are trying to question the geopolitical salience of United States. The challenge between the United States and China is in East Asia, where the China is trying to create a Sino-centric Asia and curtail the dominance of United States. And that's a conflictual situation. We'll talk about it later. There is another element which is at play. That is Sino-Russian concert of power. The Sino-Russian concert of power has two interesting connotations. One connotation is that if China does not have a correlation in power equations with Russia, then the situation might come as part of the Ukraine war, where Russia becomes militarily weak, and the entire force of the Western order then comes to be born against China. So it is in Chinese interest to have a certain degree of power, military, economic, and technological power relationship to ensure that both militarily and economically Russia does not go down. Not that Russia is going to go down, but the question basically is that the weak Russia, is not acceptable or not in the Chinese interest. The second equation is from the Russian perspective from the Chinese perspective is that the same Russia is also a millstone around the Chinese neck because China has huge economic stakes in Europe. So this is how China would require to manage this thing. But the question basically is this, that in strategic terms, Russia is an important partner for China because it helps in what's called dispersing the West's resources in dealing with two challenges rather than concentrating its resources in dealing with one challenge. The next is there is a new animal which is coming on the horizon, and that is called the middle powers. The middle powers are emerging as an important player in the global system. One element of the middle power is the BIMSTEC, but if you look at Asia, then the two middle powers, then the middle powers in Asia are Japan, South Korea, Indonesia, India. They all have their own sphere of influence, and by aligning themselves in power equations in whatever form they can, although I fully understand that some of these, like Japan and South Korea, are alliance partners of the United States, they can bring about regional peace and stability and prevent exercise of undue power and influence in self-interest by two antagonists, particularly in Asia. Similarly, the middle part, the role of Saudi Arabia, UAE. are important in the Middle East. So if you notice what is happening right now is that at one level there is an attempt being made to create a ceasefire, at one level return of hostages, and yet you find that there is not a total support for Palestinian cause, which is seen as destabilizing by the Arab countries, or what's put it GCC, who are looking at this as a disruption in their economic space and their economic well-being. So there are different contours and different aspects to this. The another issue which we have to is the weaponization of dollar. The era of United States leveraging dollar as an instrument of power and influence is getting questioned. What we are going to see, like we tried to saw in BRICS, or we try to see in large number of bilateral arrangements. We are also seeing multilateral arrangements. We are trying to see yuan trying to uh, become as a currency of choice. The whole notion is this, that the world is now, and when I say world, I define the world in three terms: the West, the East, and the South. The East and the South, East basically means the continental Asia and around this region, and the South is global South, including Latin America. These countries are now trying to move away from the total dependency of dollar. So this is the issue which is important, which we need to understand. The last point is technology domination as part of the global order. See, when we're looking at the technology domination, we try to look at it, this is a technology development, that technology development takes place. But please understand this, that as the technologies emerge, there is an equal attempt to contain the technologies within your own self and don't allow their expansion. So, what is now happening is that at one level there is a technology development taking place, on the other there are intrusive networks which are emerging, and attempt is being made is to contain those technologies. And one last element of technologies is this, is that Ukraine war has indicated, and there is a huge amount of Chinese literature that is coming out now, where they are really seriously concerned. And I was in a IISS seminar on cyber warfare with a Chinese guy, and he was very categorical. He says, we are concerned. We are concerned about the fact is, what is the leverage of technologies in conflict? I mean, is it a game changer? Is it an enabler? Is it a supporter? What is it the technology is doing? At one level, it is everything. But what is the percentages of global change it's going to bring? You see, Russia launches 21 or 31 drone attacks on Kyiv. The Kyiv claims that it has shot down 23, 24, 25. Let's take it that it's propaganda. Let's say that about 50% are shot. What is the impact on those? So we need to look at technology from its impact value, its credibility, its sustainability. Now that's an issue that we need to look at. So this is the overview of my overview of the global order. If anything, Jalan Shankar wants to add over here before I move to my next segment of the global power balance and its impact.
Sir, मैं यही बताऊंगा. Whatever you have said, sir, I think that you made very interesting points. आपने actually मेरा observation ये है कि you given a fresh look to this entire business of global order. The normal global order हम बोलते हैं bipolar है या unipolar है या multipolar है, but the issues which are emerging, which the drivers of the global order are different. The first thing which you said is earlier it was largely economic and military factors which defined the global order. Today, to a large extent, even the ideological issues are coming in, because what's happening in the Middle East and what's happening many places is the issue of economic versus ideological divide. And that is changing the perception of a global order. खास करके मिडल ईस्ट में जो हो रहा है, एंड इफ यू फैक्टर इट इन विद जो पहले अफगानिस्तान में और इराक में भी हुआ था, then the situation is actually everything falls into order. Somewhere I think we've lost sight of the fact that ये जो ideological frameworks in which people work are important. Right. दूसरी बात ये है कि आपने एक बहुत ही important बात बताया कि the struggle between China and USA, ये क्या है कि ये to have a Sino-centric Asia. इसका मतलब स्ट्रगल चाइना का एशिया को कंट्रोल करने में है। मेरा एक विचार है इसमें जो आया कि क्या चाइना गिवन अप द आइडिया दैट इट विल बी अ ग्लोबल पावर। अगर वो फंस गया है कि टू गेट डोमिनेंस इन एशिया ओनली, और चाइना को बैलेंस करने के लिए इंडिया, साउथ कोरिया, इंडोनेशिया और जापान काम कर रहे हैं, वो हो ही रहा है, तो द रोल ऑफ चाइना इन द ग्लोबल कॉन्टेक्स्ट क्या ये थोड़ा कम हो गया? बिकॉज ये क्या है कि दिस हैज इम्प्लीकेशन ऑन द ग्लोबल ऑर्डर। ओके, तीसरी बात जो मेरे ख्याल में आज का सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट बात आपने बताया है, वो है कि राइज ऑफ मिडिल पावर्स। अभी तक द बिग पावर्स एंड द ग्लोबल पावर्स एंड द सुपर पावर्स, जो भी आप बोलोगे, वो सेट करते थे ग्लोबल ऑर्डर को। अभी क्या है, ये मिडिल पावर्स का बोलबाला बढ़ गया है, क्योंकि ये देखा जा रहा है कि मिडिल पावर्स के बिना द लिंक बिटवीन व्हाट आई सेड अर्लियर, द इकोनॉमिक, मिलिट्री एंड आइडियोलॉजिकल, हो नहीं सकता। आई एम जस्ट कनेक्टिंग, आपने ये जो बोला है उसी के साथ मैं कनेक्ट कर रहा हूँ एक नया दृष्टिकोण से, कि मिडिल पावर का वैल्यू ये है कि they are middle because on all accounts they have somewhere up there by not being the top, but on one account they score over all other global powers, that is their ideological reach into the global south, which I think the middle powers trump card is that. And not only when you say global south, into the regions, the ideological and the cultural reach of the middle powers in the regions, I think, is very huge. I thought I'll just put this across. And of course, टेक्नोलॉजी का भी क्वेश्चन मार्क आ गया। 3 साल पहले हम सोचते थे कि टेक्नोलॉजी विल रूल द वर्ल्ड, टेक्नोलॉजी विल डू एवरीथिंग, बट आजकल टेक्नोलॉजी के ऊपर भी सवाल खड़ा हो रहा है। टेक्नोलॉजी डेवलप हो सकता है, कंटेन हो सकता है, कुछ भी हो सकता है, पर क्या ये युद्ध में बिल्कुल वो पोल पोजीशन होगा कि बिना टेक्नोलॉजी के आप हार जाओगे? खैर, मेरा मानना ये था कि टेक्नोलॉजी इज इंपॉर्टेंट इन बैटल एंड इन वॉर एंड इन अ ग्लोबल ऑर्डर, पर टेक्नोलॉजी के बिना भी काम चल सकता है, जिस तरीके से तालिबान ने चलाया और हमास ने चलाया। सर, ये आपके इसके ऊपर जो विचार हैं बताइए, और आगे जा सकते हैं आप। या आपके आवाज नहीं आ रहा सर, आपने म्यूट कर लिया। You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Unmute. Now we can hear. Yes.
Okay. So the first issue is, as far as China is concerned, his first order of business towards global power status, उसका सबसे बड़ा मुद्दा ये है कि उसको एशिया के ऊपर कंट्रोल करना है, और एशिया कंट्रोल करने के लिए उसको अमेरिका को एशिया से खदेड़ना है, बखाना है। एज लॉन्ग एज यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स का पावर एंड इन्फ्लुएंस एशिया में बना रहेगा, चाइना वुड हैव टू बैलेंस दैट पावर एंड इक्वेशन, और चाइना के पास इतनी क्षमता नहीं है आज की तारीख में और अगले 10 साल के अंदर कि वो जो है चीन, अमेरिका को यहाँ से खदेड़ सके। सो उसका जो कहते हैं ना, स्टेपिंग स्टोन टू ग्लोबल पावर इज is having an Asia centric or China dominated Asia. The second element of its power and influence is that China today lacks the global basis equations. It might have 117 port facilities, but there the China is only an investor. It doesn't control anything over there. Whereas the American power, global power, is exercised not from homeland United States, but it is exercised from bases and places based on its alliance system. चीन के पास कोई ऐसी अलायंस सिस्टम नहीं है, और नौ जो बनाने की कोशिश कर रहा है वो भी बड़ी एक तरह की थकी हुई और बड़े वीक काइंड ऑफ अलायंस सिस्टम की वो बनाने की कोशिश कर रहा है. फॉर एग्जांपल अगर आप ग्वादार को देखें, ग्वादार इज हार्डली अ प्लेस फॉर प्रोजेक्शन ऑफ चाइनीज पावर, और जिबूती, बिकॉज कोरिलेशन में प्रॉब्लम आती है. द सेकंड इशू इज ऑफ द बैलेंस ऑफ पावर, मिडिल पावर्स. द मिडिल पावर्स का रोल आज के तरीके ये है, वो कनेक्टर है बिग पावर के साथ. अगर आप देखिए अमेरिकन पावर जो है ईस्ट एशिया में, उसका पूरा दारोमदार जो है वो 3 कंट्रीज के ऊपर निर्भर है. वो है साउथ कोरिया, जापान और ऑस्ट्रेलिया, और उसके लिए और अभी चौथी कंट्री है फिलीपींस. ये तभी वो उनके लिए एक ये ट्राइलैटरल्स और डायट्स और वो बनाने की कोशिश कर रहा है, और एक तरह का एक ओवर आर्चिंग सिक्योरिटी सिस्टम है. उसके मुकाबले में चीन क्या कर रहा है? चीन उसके मुकाबले में कर रहा है कि चीन इज वर्किंग विद रशिया एंड नॉर्थ कोरिया टू क्रिएट इट्स ओन contra system or contra alliance. Although China is not happy with alliance with North Korea, but they are doing exercises. In the last 1 year, they have done 9 exercises together in the East China Sea. So the question basically is this: the middle powers are connected. Now let's take the middle powers of India and Indonesia in the South China Sea. अगर ये दोनों इकट्ठे हो जाते हैं, अगर दे कैन अलाइन देयर इंटरेस्ट अलोंग विद सिंगापुर एंड मलेशिया, वी विल हैव कंट्रोल ओवर द साउथ चाइना सी, जहां से कि चाइनीज जो है अपना इंडोनेशिया इंडियन ओशन पुश करने के लिए तैयार है. We can contest that, we can contain that, and we can not only fight the Chinese, you don't want to fight the Chinese, but we can have a domination of the routes to understand what the Chinese are doing, so that the Chinese understand that their alliance, which is peninsular, अभी जो चीन का जो पूरा जो है दारोमदार साउथ ईस्ट एशिया का है, वो पेनिसुलर साउथ ईस्ट एशिया के ऊपर है. मैरीटाइम साउथ ईस्ट एशिया में नहीं है. मैरीटाइम में 2 कंट्रीज आती हैं, वो है इंडोनेशिया और फिलीपींस. उसके अंदर नहीं. इंडोनेशिया इज अंडर इकोनॉमिक heft of China, but not part of its security system. So this is the important player you play. Similarly, Saudi Arabia. So this is the 2 issues I wanted to highlight. But now I come to the global power balance, if I may. So,
Please, sir.
so like the general rightly pointed out, we are in a 3-front conflict situation. There is a conflict in Ukraine, which is unending. There is a new conflict in the Arabian Peninsula between Hamas and Ukraine, and there is an ongoing Chinese assertions which are based on the Chinese perspective of Sino-centric Asia, and these 3 contests are having 2 impacts. At one level, the Chinese and Russian coming together, and United States and the West on one side, and what we say the East Asian order, which they have created on the other side, are now becoming 2 blocks of the global order. The important thing to note in this whole situation is that while the Eastern Bloc, or what they call is China and Russia are focused on the continental domain. The Western Bloc is essentially concentrated on the maritime domain. In that, also, the United States power and influence is getting diffused in three theaters, rightly brought out by General. They are in the Middle East, they are in Ukraine, not directly but through proxy, and they are in
South China
East
Sea.
China and Southeast Asia, and they are all there. So this diffusion of power vis-a-vis concentrated power of China has its own dynamics. And when we come to the Indo-Pacific, we realize that this is a situation which is not good for the Indo-Pacific. Because as usual, if you remember, the Americans came up with a pivot to Asia, and they started deploying in Southeast Asia, building up the hubs and spoke kind of systems, etc. But those got diffused by American, it, I mean, I would say irresponsible wars both in Iraq and Afghanistan. So, so the question today is a similar kind of a scenario that is emerging. The next element is that is emerging is that middle path I had already talked about. Another important part of the middle path which I did not talk about was that these powers are not taking sides. They're not taking sides. They're not. The middle path are saying Ukraine is your conflict. You sort it out. How, this is your conflict. You sort it out. They are not taking part. Hamas is a local conflict. You sort it out. We will at least play an enabling role in trying to avoid escalation and conflict control and conflict management. Their concerns are regional stability, balance, and minimum disruption of critical supply chains. They are uh, critical of the fact that global South, which is a silent sufferer in this whole chain, is not being looked upon by any of these interests. The interests of these players, both West and East, are not adequately addressing the interests of the global South, and that's the critical issue, and that's one of the reasons why in healthcare, wheat supply, fertilizers, oil, medicines, healthcare, all these things, and that is why India took up the cudgels on behalf of the global South in G20 and ensured that African Union became a 21st member of the G20. It's not that we don't feel. There is a perception, there is understanding. You cannot have a peace in the world if nearly 40% of the global community is suffering. So that's one of the reasons. So the on the Hamas and Israel war, there are two interesting dimensions. One dimension, of course, is the American and Israeli dimension, who are trying to think. Americans are realizing the fact that the Israelis are becoming too offensive oriented. A large number of casualties. It is things are going out of control, and therefore there's a need to restrict the Israelis. But that's not the whole issue. The whole issue is there is a new alignment of power that is taking place over the Hamas Iraq war, Israel war. The against the West, there's a there's a there's a coalition of forces developing between Russia and China, supported by the BRICS, who have seen how the foreign ministers of the Arab countries went to China. They are now coming this week into or next week into India, and they were going all over the place to ensuring the support for Palestinian cause against Israel. Now, this is not because this will help create a two-nation state, etc. So that's not important. The important thing is this, that unlike in the past, where the West was the sole arbitrator of the two-state solution, in future, the two-state solution will have to take cognizance of the global East, that is China and Russia, who will also be sitting on the high table. And this week, in the General Assembly, Wang Yi is chairing the Security Council meeting on Arab-Israeli conflict. So what are they saying? They're saying two things. They're saying what Hamas did was wrong. They are saying what Israel is doing is even worse. There is a humanitarian crisis that is occurring. We need to address the humanitarian crisis. Israel cannot be given, I repeat, cannot be given a free hand to kill and maim people, Palestinians. And all this, plus the fact is that we have to find a solution. The world has to find a solution. Now the interesting part comes in. The interesting part is that solution will no longer will be defined by the West. And here also, interestingly, European Union is taking the side of the Palestinians, and you have seen how the British society is getting divided over all this issue of. So this is as far as the global order is concerned. So there are multiple aspects of this, but the bottom line of this is, like I said, firstly, that it is getting divided, the interests are getting divided, and the West is no longer going to be the sole arbitrator. Oh, is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. Where does India come in? Eventually, one of the big voices that are being raised today in this new order system is this. Is both the Russians and the Americans are saying, bring in India as a peacekeeper or for arbitrating peace in this region. Why is India there? Because India is the only country today in the global system which is acceptable to the West as East, perhaps not China. But Chinese are clever enough to understand that given the power equation between China and United States and China and the West, if there is anybody who can be an honest broker, and that is India. So the power of India lies in being an honest broker, taking no sides, and yet playing an important role of peace enhancement, if not peace development, peace creation between the Hamas and the Israelis. So this is an important issue that I thought I will highlight.
इसके बारे में can I talk on this, sir? The role of India. ये जो आपने बोला कि India's role in global affairs, ये इसके बारे में हमने पहले भी बात कर चुके हैं कि India's role in global affairs will go up because of many reasons. बट ये जो बात आपने बताया वो मैं उसको थोड़ा रीइंफोर्स करना चाहता हूँ. रीइंफोर्स इसीलिए है क्योंकि ये जो ग्रुप ऑफ फॉरेन मिनिस्टर्स फ्रॉम द मिडिल ईस्ट जो पहले चाइना में गए हैं और उसके बाद वो चाहते हैं कि हर वीटो मेंबर के पास जाके बात करें, और ये 5 सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल के वीटो मेंबर्स के अलावा सिर्फ वो एक और देश जिससे के साथ बात करना चाहते हैं वो है भारत के साथ बात करना चाहते हैं. मैं बिल्कुल मानता हूं कि भारत का रोल इसमें बिल्कुल निष्पक्ष है और सबके साथ जुड़ा है सिवाय चीन के. इसमें एक और चीज है जो मेजर प्लेयर जिसके बारे में आज तक हमने ज्यादा जिक्र नहीं किया, वो है ईरान के साथ भी हमारा संबंध अच्छे हैं. ईरान के साथ भी हमारा संबंध अच्छे हैं. भारत का जो एक्सेप्टेबिलिटी है इस पूरे माहौल में इज वेरी हाई, इसमें दो राय नहीं है। और मेरा सवाल ये है और मेरा डाउट भी ये है, क्या ये भारत और इंडिया इज इट प्रिपेयर्ड टू टेक दिस मैंटल? ठीक है, G20 में हमने जो बोल दिया, क्या हमारे पास वो स्किल सेट है, स्किल या इरादा है या डिटर्मिनेशन है टू स्टेप अप फॉर आर्बिट्रेशन? वो है मेरा सवाल इसमें। क्योंकि यूक्रेन में भी हमारा, अगर आप देखेंगे तो क्रेडेंशियल्स अच्छे थे। रशिया यूक्रेन वॉर में भी हमारे क्रेडेंशियल्स अच्छे थे टू बी ऑनेस्ट आर्बिट्रेटर। यहाँ भी वही कहानी है, पर क्या हम कर पाएंगे या करना चाहते हैं, वो मेरा सवाल है।
Okay, let me take a shot at that. It is a difficult choice India will have, but I think if India gets the support from East, West, and the Arab world, then India should not hesitate in. And today, India has got huge leverages with the Arab world. You are aware of the fact IT,
हाँ जी।
YouTube. So we have got good relationship with the only people whom I find who might have problems with India's role, maybe Turkey and Pakistan
चाइना
playing a spoil sport or the other, who doesn't matter
वो
really. Okay, okay, but they have influence. But but my concern is this, that while United States may talk about India's role as an arbitrator, I don't think the American alliance partners are very comfortable with India uh, becoming an arbitrator in this conflict. Primarily because what actions I have seen being taken by these Five Eyes and Six Eyes and these guys, people, is basically is वो कहते हैं ना, ईर्ष्या भरी नजर से वो देखते हैं हमारे को, and they
वो
are
अंडरकट
concerned
करते हैं सर।
and they try to undercut India in every way. So, but I think the sad part of the whole issue is that this whole decision taking is over the next 4 to 5 months. India is going to go into an election mode. I do not think the prime minister or the country will have the bandwidth to look at electoral scenario and also play this role. Although we can, but at least we can be an important investor in the peace process in whatever way we can. And how we can invest in the peace process is something we can have a future discussion on that. I mean, I got some ideas, but they are very, very fuzzy at this point in time.
नहीं नहीं, ठीक है सर, आप जो बोल रहे हो बिल्कुल सही है। इसमें एक और चीज ऐड करना चाहता हूँ जो आपने बोला है कि इंडिया हैज गॉट ह्यूज इंटरेस्ट ऑल्सो। ये जो I2U2 और IMEC में हमारा काफी इंटरेस्ट है, इकोनॉमिक और डिप्लोमेटिक और कल्चरल इंटरेस्ट है इन दिस ऑर्डर विच इज डेवलपिंग इन दिस एरिया। और ये दिस इंटरेस्ट ऑल्सो शुड propel us to take a role in bringing about peace in this whole story। पर वही है, लास्ट जैसे आपने बोला कि क्या हमारे पास बैंडविड्थ है, इट्स ओपन एंडेड क्वेश्चन। इसके बारे में हम अगला चर्चा हमारा, आपका और हमारा, ये इसी बात पे हो सकता है कि इंडिया के पास क्या बैंडविड्थ है, क्या इरादा है, क्या दृढ़ता है कि हम ये कर सकते हैं। तो यहाँ पर ये छोड़ देते हैं। तो आप आगे आपका
Yeah, but
चौथा
now I'll
पॉइंट
talk
ले
a
जाइए।
bit about balance of power. This thing, as we already discussed, the core issue of the balance of power in Asia is marked by the contestation between China and United States. And here we have the we see naked attempts at building up each other's own security interests and security capacity, security capabilities. China is asserting power and influence both in South China Sea and as well as in the Taiwan Strait, as very aptly highlighted by General Shankar through those slides. There have been 160 incidents of near misses between Chinese and the US plus allies. The second element is that the correlation of power is being changed in the region in which by, like I said, the United States building up its own alliance system, hardening its own alliance system, and one last element of that alliance system, जो last उनका element है, वो है Philippines. Philippines अभी एक पक्का बन गया है United States का ally. So basically Philippines की एक बड़ी interesting facet है. वो Philippines क्यों? Philippines इसलिए क्यों between Taiwan and Philippines there is a narrow strait through
Bashi
which
Gap.
almost all barren strait, am I right?
Bashi
Bashi strait,
Straits.
Bashi strait, through which almost all the submarines of the United Chinese pass through. So if you are controlling that Bashi and you are controlling Taiwan and then you are controlling Japan on top and the seas around it, you are actually constraining China. तो ये जो है बैलेंस ऑफ पावर के अंदर ये जो है ये सिलसिला चलता रहेगा जब तक इसका कोई समाधान नहीं होता। और मेरी असेसमेंट के मुताबिक चीन इस क्षमता में नहीं है कि वो फोर्स लगा के टू यूज फोर्स टू टेक ओवर ताइवान। इनफैक्ट इन सैन फ्रांसिस्को Xi Jinping brushed aside this whole notion of attack on Taiwan by saying neither in 27 nor in 35 there are any intentions that we have of, of taking action against Taiwan. But the bottom line is not that. The bottom line is Taiwan remains the central fulcrum of strategic
Of the
stability
first,
in East Asia, as also the South China Sea remains the fulcrum, and that in that the Philippines area around the Philippines. So this is unfortunately is a reality. The problem now is this, like I said, that there is in to counter the American presence and American realignments of power equations in this region, the Chinese are working on making their own narrative, contra narrative based on North Korea, which is being technologically upgraded through Russian technology. He just launched a satellite, and they have stopped all their they have annulled all their agreements with South Korea, and there are and the Chinese and the Russians. They have done 9 exercises, sorry, 5 joint exercises in the region called the Northern Interaction in Sea of Japan and East China Sea. An important point which I want to highlight in the Indo-Pacific construct is this. South China Sea is essentially a buffer between East Asia and Indian Ocean. This buffer allows China to deal with the two in separate compartments. Now, the important thing for Southeast Asia and Indians' role is to dominate the sea lines of communication, sea lanes in this region, including the straits like Lombok, Sunda, and Malacca, to ensure that the Chinese attempt of a free passage into the Indian Ocean are contained and constrained. The Navy has to play this role in concert with Indonesians, in concert with Malaysians, like undertaking Malacca patrols, and in terms with Singaporeans, and also bringing in the Australians. When we talk to the Australians, we say this in open terms. You cannot have it both ways. Perth and areas around that is part of Indian Ocean. You have to have deployments in Indian Ocean. You cannot leave it to one single country to be, as you are aware of the fact, and आपके listeners को पता है कि हम 8 या 9 स्टैंड बाई पेट्रोल 24/7 8-9 जगह पे रखते हैं जहाँ पे हमारे शिप्स हैं प्रेजेंट रहते हैं 365 दिन 24/7। ये एक बहुत बड़ी कमिटमेंट इंडिया ने ले रखी है, और ये कमिटमेंट इंडिया की नहीं है। इंडियन ओशन की सिक्योरिटी हमारी सिर्फ नहीं है। 61% of the Japanese oil comes from Middle East. सिमिलरली इंडोनेशिया का भी जो है सारी ट्रेड इधर से होती है। आसियान की जितनी ट्रेड यूरोप के साथ है इधर से होती है। सो द क्वेश्चन बेसिकली इज दिस, is that each one of these countries have to invest in regional security. And when I say regional security, all I'm trying to say is this, that regional security in the South China Sea, Bay of Bengal area, this is the area I'm basically focusing on, has to be ensured by joint patrols, cooperative mechanisms, secure MDAs, and power projection. They might not have role, we can do power projection. But the issue point is basically this, is to give a message that countries in this region wants a stable, secure, and rule-based order to prevail. We do not want Chinese assertions in this region. So this is an important point that we need to look at when we're looking at the next point, which is very important, and in fact, which is going to be very, very serious as the days go by, is the changes in the nuclear equations. China is upgrading its nuclear arsenal. It's got 500, it will have 1,000 by the end of this decade. It might have 1,500 by this thing. But that's not important. What is more important is that China is also creating a huge number of vectors. And these vectors are in the range of 4,000 plus. So Chinese are developing capacities and capabilities of using conventional vectors for precision strikes. I'll give you a small example. This Coco Island area, whatever is North Coco, whatever Coco Island area, is now India has actually designated it as a Chinese facility. Okay, so let's take it as a Chinese facility. It's easy way to say Chinese facility. What happened? Now it's got a over the horizon radar over there, or might deploy other long range radars. So and then you link this up with what's happening in Hambantota. You have now a chain of radars, and you have these damn ships of the Chinese Yang 6, 5, 6, whatever it is called, who are doing underwater survey. They're taking temperature surveys of the ocean space. The whole idea is, and layer that up with a battery of DF-26s with a range of 2,500 kilometers. Now you see the balance of equation changing. We can't afford it. We simply can't afford it. So therefore, it is not only for India. When we talk to the Americans say we will provide you systems, we'll provide you MDA, etc. All gold mold stuff. But the Indian Ocean region is given least priority. And worst part is this, while we can understand the American and the Japanese focus in the East Asia, our friends in Southeast Asia are not giving it the kind of importance that they need to give for their own sake. That's the sad part. And what is happening in return? There was a 5-nation exercise recently held by China, which included Thailand, which is an American ally, Laos, Cambodia, Malaysia, and Vietnam. These 5 nations. So China and countries around that will move in their self-interest. So what we need to ask our friends in this region is, what is our self-interest? And this nuclear equations is going to become a very serious issue, because INF treaty does not exist. This CTBT has been annulled, although the Russians say they will abide by it. if the nuclear weapon testing starts taking place, and with the North Korea there, we are looking at a situation where there is a large amount, an asymmetric nuclear threat, A, B, backed up by conventional precision strike capabilities which can hit our national critical infrastructure. Please remember one thing, when Pakistan launches a precision strike based on conventional warheads against India, we can tackle that strike easily because we can then retaliate with multiple number of times against the same thing and also back up with a nuclear response capability. But when the China loses that, the quandary for us is this: we can, like I have argued in my paper on missile force for India, that we should be able to hit the Pearl Delta. We should be able to hit the Pearl Delta, but the escalation dynamics thereafter becomes very complicated. I don't want to go into details, but they become very complicated. Something which we need to take cognizance of. This is the issue that I want to highlight. Then the last issue is the trade and economics. Southeast Asia is essentially becoming an economic colony of China. They have $995 billion of yearly trade with them. They are the back end for their large amount of supply chains. They are not going to move. Added to that is the fact is both Japan, South Korea, and now with Albany's visit, even Australia is going to become are hugely committed in Chinese economy. The question therefore arises is this: is the economic considerations going to override security considerations in a conflict scenario? Where in security considerations, these are the allies and the strategic partners of the United States, and in economic considerations, these are the partners of China. So how are these equations going to play out is something which we need to be concerned about. Now coming to India's role in this whole issue of Indo-Pacific, the important part to understand is this: that the Chinese assertions in in the Indian Oceans are increasing. Recently, you are aware of fact that they had a major exercise with the Pakistani, where the submarines and other frigates and other offensive ships took place. They have had with Pakistan, Russia, and China. They have had. You just now heard a $4.5 billion refinery coming up. Again, yesterday we heard a news of another surveillance ship of the Chinese. So China, importantly, point to note is China is increasing its sea legs in the Indian Ocean. We have to be careful about it. We have to be able to manage that. And that is where the whole important thing lies. As far as the United States and our strategic partnership is concerned, it's going to be of no use in terms of United States picking up any load from us, of security load from us in the Indian Ocean. That load will have to be picked up by India. At best, United States can provide us with surveillance support system, etc., etc. I had posed a question to my American friend sometime back. I said, you have this big base in Qatar where you fly all kinds of aircrafts. Why can't that base be used for surveillance in the Indian Ocean and provide us with critical information of movements of these ships, particularly those going on these maritime patrols in the East Asia? The question was never answered. So I think I've finished the time, and I think I'll stop here. But if you have any other issues, I will be happy to discuss. Thank you for your time and
नहीं sir,
attention.
I think you covered big canvas और एक नया कैनवस में नया पेंटिंग आपने शुरू किया है जो हम आगे ले चलेंगे। और जो मुख्य बात जो आपने इस in this part you have covered is that India has to start looking ज़्यादातर at Malaysia, Indonesia, वियतनाम, फिलीपींस और ये इन देशों के साथ गठबंधन बनाना और और रिलेशनशिप बढ़ाना इज मोर इम्पोर्टेंट, राइट? और हमारा ये चाइना का गतिविधियों को कंट्रोल करने के लिए इज मोर इम्पोर्टेंट. देन दिस प्रॉब्लम ऑफ इकोनॉमी वर्सेस सिक्योरिटी इज आल्सो इम्पोर्टेंट इशू. तो इफ आई लिंक इट, जो पहले हमने बात किया, इकोनॉमी वर्सेस वर्सेस सिक्योरिटी, ये तीन ट्रायंगल हमें तंग करता रहेगा जैसे हम आगे बात करते जाएंगे इसके बारे में, क्योंकि पूरा दारोमदार हमारा ग्लोबल ऑर्डर का इन तीनों चीजों के ऊपर ही बनता है. मेरे ख्याल में एक बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट बात आपने बताया है, और जो मेरे ख्याल में आज का होल स्टोरी इज विद यूएस कमिटमेंट. ये जो तीनों युद्ध क्षेत्र में ज्यादा बढ़ता जा रहा है, राइट? मैंने एक बार बताया कि इंडिया इज इन द मिडल डूइंग नथिंग, बट इंडिया ऑल्सो हैज टू रियलाइज कि वी आर ऑन आवर ओन. जो आपने बताया कि कल कुछ होगा तो हमें खुद करना पड़ेगा, और इसमें एक चीज हमें याद रखना पड़ेगा कि चाइना का इस इलाके में इंटरेस्ट बहुत है. जिस तरीके से जापान का 61% ऑयल इस इलाके से जाता है, चाइना का भी
71%.
60% के ऑयल, 71% इसी इलाके से जाता है. तो चाइना इस इलाके को छोड़ नहीं सकता. चाइना इस इलाके को छोड़ नहीं सकता. यूएसए इस इलाके में आ नहीं सकता. तो अगर चाइना के गतिविधियों के ऊपर पाबंदी लगाना है तो इंडिया हैज टू स्टेप अप टू द प्लेट. इंडिया के खुद के इंटरेस्ट में है ये करने की जरूरत. ये किसी और की ये बात ये नहीं है कि इंडिया नीड्स टू बी द नेट सिक्योरिटी प्रोवाइडर वगैरह वगैरह, वो अंग्रेजी है. हमें खुद हमारा सुरक्षा के लिए चाइना को कंटेन करना हमारा खुद का गेम प्लान होना चाहिए, जिसमें यूएसए का रोल सबसे कम है, राइट? और ये माहौल हमें पता होना चाहिए, क्योंकि जैसे बताया गया है कि श्रीलंका में भी एक ऑयल रिफाइनरी लगाना चाहते हैं चाइना वाले. तो आप सोचिए, अगर कोको आइलैंड में इनका बेस है और हम्बन टोटा भी एक कल का बेस बन जाएगा और ग्वादर में भी कुछ होगा, तो हमें क्या रेस्पॉन्स देना है. वी हैव टू थिंक, एंड ये टाइम आ गया है कि वी शुड टेक सम टफ स्टेप्स कि भाई अगर आप ये करोगे तो हम ये कर सकते हैं, और ये करेंगे, करके दिखाएंगे. और कुछ ये नहीं कि हर वक्त एक कदम पीछे हट के बात करो. ये टाइम आ गया कि हमें भी एक कदम आगे लेके बात करना है. पर इसके बारे में क्या आगे कदम ले सकते हैं वगैरह वगैरह, और ये दृश्य कैसे बनेगा, ये अगला हमारा सिलसिला होगा जनरल ब्रिगेडियर सहगल के साथ. ठीक है? क्योंकि एक यू हैव गिवन एन एब्सोल्युटली न्यू स्टोरी टू द होल थिंग, सर. So with this, I'll take a few questions. We'll this thing. Lalit Narayan, thank you. Thanks a lot. Sir, Lalit is from US. He is into a lot of global investments and all that. So the only advice I'll give you, Lalit, and the major takeaway for you is this. You have to start investing in middle powers. Today, middle powers are the powers which have the best, economics. They have the best stability, and the middle powers are someone. Take an example like Indonesia, which is being wooed by USA and by China, and soon it will be wooed by India also. So naturally, Indonesia is a growing power, and people have to start looking at it. So that's the first one. Second one, sir, is Anand says, and Indo-Pacific order requires a credible India. Despite notable improvement, there's still a ways to go. We require more consistency in political economic spheres. And he's spoken about civil-military fusion and politico-military fusion and all that. So your views. And I do agree with him, but I still would like to hear your views on this, in line with what you have spoken.
Just let me read the question. Indo-Pacific requires a credible India. Okay, so so there are three elements of India's should be of India's response. The first element is we have been talking about Act Asia policy, Act Southeast Asia policy. We have about 100 odd billion, 120 billions odd of trade. We have to enhance our trade with Southeast Asia. The whole ball game is basically is this, that Southeast Asia is totally dependent on China. We have to break that dependence not by this thing, by through market forces, and through market forces we have to become more savvy investors. And for doing that, for example, in Indonesia, we have a very small footprint. Entire milk and the milk products and all the dairy products come to them from Australia at huge cost. We can do the same thing at half the cost here. I'll show you another example. Till yesterday, we did not have a direct flight to Jakarta. Now we have a direct flight. Earlier, you were paying 60,000 rupees to fly to Indonesia. Now you are paying 28,000 rupees to fly to Indonesia directly from Mumbai. Economics is one. We have to invest. I'm not saying join the RCEP. There are reasons why we have not joined the RCEP. We will not agree to join the RCEP, but we have to revisit the FTA with ASEAN. Second issue is militarily. Military cooperation and exercises are absolute important. We Indonesians gave us Salang base for developing it as a port facility, etc. And you know what does port facility means in it's a dual use system. We haven't done anything yet. We are slow. Indonesians are cautious, but we can pressurize the Indonesians. The third issue is is heavy to say that we won't want to patrol in South China Sea, etc., etc. We must be have a clear purpose in mind, that what we want to do in South China Sea. And while we are sending patrols, we are doing exercises with ASEAN, send two ships over there. What is our larger purpose? What is the security architecture that India is trying to develop with the ASEAN? And when I talk about with ASEAN, my first step is integrating both sides of the Malacca Straits, that is the Bay of Bengal, and up to the Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia area, so that we have at least a control over this area. Yeah? Nobody can come and do this and surprise us. The Chinese are not fools if they're moving into Cocoa Islands, or they are developing the port facilities in Bangladesh, or they are coming into this. They have a purpose. So we need to also create the same purpose and have and do it with dexterity and with the strategic understanding as to why we are doing it. It should not be just सरकार ने दो पैसे दे दिए वो लगा दिए जाके वो कर रहे हैं, वो नहीं है. Okay, I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, you are very clear about it. No doubt. The role of Global South, led by India and a team of lead nations, is the new and emerging global, regional, and Indo-Pacific orders. Your views, something on what you said, the middle powers, the Gadbandhan of the middle powers. Is it feasible?
Global South is a huge marketplace. Global South is by and large seeing a GDP growth of 7 to 8%, 6%, 7 to 8%. It still remains a very important market. It's a future market. You have to start developing that market. You have to develop the India's and Chinese difference lies is that we invest in people and economy. Chinese invest in political leaders and they do all their work through them, and they are always keen to ensure, like the ODA assistances of Japanese and other countries, that all orders go to their own companies. We are not like that. we want to develop the local skill sets, etc., etc. We are more accepted, but we have a problem. The problem is we are just about a $4 trillion economy. We have a huge, problem at home. Our people are not that well off. We have to invest in our own people. So the funds available are limited. So therefore, India has to work in conjunction with other powers and players and develop a strategy. We have been trying to do, if you recollect, this African corridor thing we have started with Japan, etc. And Prime Minister Abe gave a speech also. But that's the way to go. Bring in other players who have the money and investment to invest in these areas. And then also we have to be very clear. What is the criticality of our investments? Ever realize कि बिम्स्टेक में इथोपिया को क्यों मेंबर बनाया है? इथोपिया क्या लाता है? Ethiopia, sir, is greatest place for natural resources and what they call as critical minerals. Number two, there is only coastal railway line that goes is to Ethiopia, which the Chinese have built. So they have already created an economic ecosystem to uh, draw the iron ore or various kinds of ores, which are natural resources, transport them by rail, and they have the ships around Djibouti and Zanzibar and other places to take them to China. That's the kind of ecosystem you have to do. So we have to see what we have done now. Char Bahar is now finally going to become operational after so many years. See, this is what we need to understand is that investment is okay. Talking about investment is okay, but we have to be practically oriented and our projects must not linger on and on and on. We There must be a consortium approach of doing projects. I mean, you can curse Adani to the cows come home. The fact of the matter is, the Adani is the only guy who's running the Haifa port. Yeah,
Yeah, no doubt.
and Adani knows exactly what goes out of that port or doesn't go out of that port. So if you want to look at intelligence, also they're the best player. So what I'm trying to say is that you have to have a plan and execute that plan to ensure that A, your interests are met, and A plus the African interests are met. And that's why they will be, you are not doing them a favor. You are developing a market for yourself, which will help you tomorrow. ये दान की बात नहीं है. हमारी अप्रोच ये है कि वो बेचारे अफ्रीकन हैं, वो अंडर डेवलप्ड है, तो उनको हम दान दे रहे हैं. नहीं, दान नहीं दे रहे हैं आप. हमारी ये अप्रोच नेपाल के साथ भी थी और हमने उसका कॉन्सिक्वेंस देखा है. आप दान नहीं दे रहे हैं किसी को, आप अपना इंटरेस्ट कर रहे हैं. आप अपना इंटरेस्ट कर रहे हैं, उस इंटरेस्ट को कभी नहीं भूलना. यू शुड नॉट फॉरगेट दैट इंटरेस्ट एवर. दैट्स द इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट. Sorry, I had taken a little long then.
No problem, sir. Sir, we'll take the last question. This is glad to listen to you after a long time. Question is on honest broker. Has there ever been a nation which was an honest broker, or can there be one among major world nations ever?
You are 100% right, sir. Honest broker is a oxymoron term, but the point at issue is that it is a question of dependency. Who depends on whom? अभी आप जब घर में भी लड़ाई होती है तो किसी के पास जाते हो ना, मामा चाचा के पास जाते हो. मामा ताया का भी अपना इंटरेस्ट है उसके अंदर, but you say his major interest in the resolution of the problem. So the honest broker of India basically is this, that if India does broking in Hamas and Israeli conflict, India is going to be doing it not only for the Palestinian cause, which is the first point in our agenda, but also doing it to ensure the IMEC corridor comes place. There is a resolution on positive lines. that there is various projects that we have in mind gonna go. There is a peace and stability in the region where we are heavily invested. So so the honest broker basically means is that I do not have X to grind, and I have no ulterior motives, but I am willing to invest my time and resources for a larger cause. But I am also aware of the fact that the larger cause helps me in my interest. I'm very clear on that. Thank you.
Right, sir. I think we'll stop at this because we've gone quite over, and we'll continue because we'll get together after a couple of weeks and we'll
Thank you, sir.
take
Yes,
this
yes,
discussion
absolutely.
forward. Right, sir? And you
Thank you.
frame the agenda and we'll take it up and we'll take it
Thank you, sir.
further.
Thank you.
Because,
Thank you. Thank you.
right, sir, because a new thing which we need to think of, or personally, I felt this was a whiff of fresh air. It was,
You are being very kind.
thanks a
No, no,
lot.
no. It's not. It is the
No,
same
no,
old
sir.
bottle. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, sir. And
God
thanks a
bless you.
lot for all the questions. We couldn't take all, but but when there's always a
You can
next
put
day.
them on the YouTube video. I'll try and answer them.
No, it's okay. It's all there, sir. It's all there.
Okay.
Anytime you
Thank
can
you.
have this thing. Right,
Okay.
sir?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir, and good evening, and Jai Hind to everyone, and Jai Hind to you also, sir.
Thank you. Jai Hind, sir. Jai Hind to
Jai Hind, Jai Hind.
everyone. God bless.